Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. Today I'm going to be going over my Tariel, Reckoner of Souls EDH deck. To save you guys a bit of time, this is essentially my Basandra deck with black cards added. So it is, if you're unfamiliar with that deck, I posted a Commander 2011 restricted deck. So it might not be that interesting. This is an underwhelming deck. But this is a video just for the cards that's in it currently. Tariel, however you pronounce her. She is an interesting Daga General. She is 7 mana for a 4/7 Flying Vigilance that can tap to put a creature card at random from target opponent's graveyard into play. She is, in some situations, vastly underwhelming compared to what other colors generals you have access to in this color. For example, there's Oros, who is essentially a somewhat control-ish board wipe dragon, where you can burn all non-white creatures for 3. Then you have the super aggressive Kalia, and you have the new Helm Smasher guy, who's actually a lot better for what this type of deck usually tries to do. Normally, when you see a Tariel deck, you think Daga control with lots of board wipes and some kind of manipulation. This is actually the second time I've run her as the general. The first time, I did exactly that. It was like about 12 board wipes, lots of reanimation, ways of doubling her ability, and lots of control and partial indestructible stuff on my side. The problem with that approach is that she has essentially been outright replaced by Zurgo, the Helm Smasher guy, because he himself grants himself indestructible on your turn. Thus you can board wipe and keep your general out on the same turn at sorcery speed, that is. But this rendition of the deck is incredibly it's just not nearly as strong as it should be. Being that I'm still doing that self-restriction silly thing, I wanted a slightly stronger deck than what Basandra had to offer. By adding another color, I didn't make it much stronger, but it's still underwhelming for what it should be. I'm not too certain if I'm actually going to be keeping this deck about as is. I've been thinking about adding more cards, making it like a transforming deck with all the legendaries of the color cycle. Like I could use Basandra or Vishkal, or Malfegor, or Tariel here, or even Oros, and just switch around the cards for a one of like 4 different types of decks. But anyways, let's go ahead and get the deck parts done. Again, this is exactly like what is in my Basandra deck. There's essentially just another color added. So I'm not going to stick too long on the creatures. You either know what they do or you don't. Mother of Runes taps to give something I control protection of a color. Monk Realist enters destroyed enchantment. Nezumi Graveyard was new. He is essentially a 2/1 for 2, and he can exile a card from a graveyard. If there's nothing in the graveyard, he then flips, which gives us a legendary 4/2 with a Rise from the Graves on a stick, or essentially just gets a creature from the battlefield at instant speed. That's pretty cool. Fleshbag Marauder is a more well-known card. He just enters and everyone sacks a creature, including myself. Nighthawk is the epitome of what a black creature ought to be. 3 mana for 2/3 Flying Death Touch Lifelink. It is actually fantastic. This is one of the best cards in the deck. False Prophet, although somewhat counteractive for what the general wants to do, we do need to have some kind of control to actually make it to our massively overcosted general. And something like this can really ward off attacks and whatnot to actually get us in that position. And of course we can sack that to the Fleshbag if we need a desperate board wipe. Voice of All is still in the deck, as is Bryon, and Flame Tongue, and Sad Robot. Sewer Nemesis is a unique card. I don't see it played a lot, and it's pretty nifty for what it does. You'd think you'd see it more in mill decks. It's only been printed in just this one set as far as I'm aware. It's 4 for an XX, where X is the number of cards in someone's graveyard. When he enters, you choose them. And when that chosen player casts a spell, that person mills. The cool thing is I can even target myself. So again, this is something that would be really clever in a proper mill deck, maybe with Phonax or something, but I just don't really see him played too often. Mortarvore, although, is his more proper associate, where he's power and toughness equal to all creatures in all graveyard, and that regenerate there really is the saver. We still have the Muse. Shriekmaw it replaced some of our other poor quality target removal, so we have a kind of like a terror on a creature here. Bysandra did make the 99 cut. Oros is the potential alternate general. Being that this deck is not over-the-top aggressive, and I don't have lots of ways of ramping out, and I also have a few red and black creatures, I did not feel it appropriate to keep him as the general. But he's still pretty good. Again, I used to actually run him. Like, I had another one of those self-restricted decks where it was Invasion and Apocalypse only, and the only outside card was Oros. And that was a cutesy deck because I got to play with like the captain and all sorts of life gain shenanigans. Side Spectre is another exotic one. It's pretty nifty that what it does is basically is better in multiplayer. It's a 6 mana, although that's something that usually just comes down too slow, too late. A 6 mana for 4/4 flyer is not exceptional, especially when something like Bysandra comes out faster. But the potential of burning everyone is always helpful. Dark Hatchling is another version of Shriek Maw, where 1 more mana we get to keep it with 1 more toughness. And there's also that flying too. Extractor Demon's kind of nifty for, again, some self-mill. He really helps get some extra targets in here for Tariel. Still have the Mana Charge Dragon and the Angelic Arbiter. We have a Butcher of Malakir. He is essentially a Grave Pact or Deceit of Erebos on a stick, where we have a 5/4 flyer, which is decent for 7, but more importantly, when any other creatures on our side dies, each opponent has a sack. Vishkau is actually probably the strongest card in the deck currently, even though he is very expensive to cast. He is lifelink flying and potential creature target removal. All people usually complain about the fact that you have to remove all the counters, but everything that Vishkau gives you is just very strong, especially when you start pairing him with things like Butcher Malakir, Fleshbag Marauder, self-sacking things. Again, what I'm tempted to do is just to keep on collecting more black and white cards and more lands so I can keep switching the generals out of the deck to whichever legendary I want to play. And he is technically, out of the selection of the 3 colors I'm collecting here, the strongest general out of all of them. Angel Despair is, again, we're seeing the black-white here. She's our target removal of any kind of permanent. Chroma still made the cut, even though she's expensive. We don't have a lot of red in the deck to abuse the fire breathing. The protection on her body really does kind of make her just kind of hard to deal with. A Reaver Demon is a board wipe for all non-blacks. I have the Kako Demon here. He's not in here anymore. He was just 10 mana versus 8 mana. One is just an 8/8 vanilla guy, and this one's flying. I chose to go with the flyer route. I do have both avatars. I used to have the Avatar Fury only, but we have Avatar Woe. I rarely have ever got to cast him from his alternate cost. He's always going to be 8 mana. Like most of the games, I'm either dead before I can cast it from that many creatures, or I hard cast it anyways. But the tap to destroy creature is always helpful. And then there's Avatar Fury, and we still have the Artisan as the most expensive creature in the deck. That little bit of recursion is kind of the only recursion we have. There could be a Grave Robber in here, but he didn't really match the cut. There's just too much to put in and too little space to keep it functional. Going on to the spells, we still have Oblation and Chaos Warp for tucking. And removal, we still have Path. Now we have a Terminate and a Wrecking Ball. This actually lets us get a land. And a Mortify. So adding black there just helped us get some of the better removal packages. Like for just creatures. Like it used to be a lot of Enchantment and Artifact, but now we have more creature stuff. Orange Thunder is fantastic for the kicker. Return to Dust is a great 2-for-1. And Master Warcraft still made a cut, although I'm not doing combat shenanigans as much. The ability to make one opponent kill another opponent or skip their combat is just super helpful. For more global wipes, we still have some Burn-Alls. Wild Ricochet is great for copying ramp. And a little bit of draw is always helpful. Usually this goes and gets me, sadly, Vishkau. This is usually just to go get me Vishkau, and if there's something I need at the time, like ramp or a proper accelerant to something, I might get that, but from almost all the games, every time I've seen this, I'm going to go get Vishkau. Maybe if I already have Vishkau, I'll get some way of abusing him like Grave Pact. Rise from the Grave is a target reanimation. It's always fun giving things a zombie creature type, though. We have more creature removal in the form of Other Sacrifice, and a little bit of extra draw. And we still have the Earthquake and the Austere Command as our final wipes. Going on to the permanents. We are still running the Stranglehold. New goodie we have now that we're adding black is Grave Pact. Again, this is another theme that kind of what the deck is trying to do is manipulate other people's creatures and saving, kind of just 2-for-1ing people when we lose something. And then the final enchantment is Martyr's Bond, which is Grave Pact on steroids. It just does it for more than just creatures. And then we're on to the artifacts with the Soul Ring. Essentially all the artifacts are the same except these two. I was able to add 2 more 2-mana costing accelerants. So that actually does really help the deck. It just helps things come out a lot faster. So the rest of these are still the other accelerants here. I took out the Felwar Stone, I believe, because the colorless wasn't super helpful. And a little bit of equipment there. Yeah, the Champion's Helm or some kind of Shroud on Tariel is really good because that just makes her last a lot longer. In a normal Tariel deck, you would try to find ways of making her indestructible with like a Darksteel Plate or a Boros Charm or something like that, but we don't have that in this allotment of cards. And we're on to the lands. Again, very few changes since we simply just added another color, so we still have these as the 2 colorless producers. I took 1 out. Because again, the color lands here really do suck. I guess I kind of got, I guess, accustomed to actually good lands in my 3 to 5 color decks. I hate lands that come into play tapped, like with a sick passion. In this deck, I think it has like 13 or so that come to play tapped. So we have 2 guys to go fetch us some basics, Bazooka Bog for tech, and a proper tapped land that sometimes I don't mind running. But the rest of these, other than the command tower, I just hate tap lands. The only reason I would ever run a Kangaroo land is if you have the Candelabra Tuanos or some way of untapping to go infinite, but there's not a lot to choose from, so I had to include them. Same thing with the Vivids. I absolutely hate Vivids, but I don't have a lot of other choices. And finally, I'm actually running a lot of lands in here. I think there's like 38 or 39. I am running the 3 cycle lands. The potential of coming to play tapped is somewhat, like, I still hate it, but I can always replace the card if I can. So if it's a late draw, it's always okay. But the rest of these are just basics. Same artwork on these. I just chose this one because it's my favorite full art Zendikar land too. Other than the mountain with a big circle, I like this one as the swamp. But this is a predominantly black deck, so there's a lot more black sources than anything else. Red is probably the least common color in the deck, so we have the fewest red, and mid-range white. There's a few cards I still have that I haven't gotten rid of yet. These are kind of like the excess of what it was when it was Bassandra. There's a few black cards in here that just didn't make the cut. So we have 1 extra artifact. Since I'm not doing combat shenanigans, the Vows didn't make the cut. Although these 2 with Bassandra are always fun to force somebody to attack somebody else. Prison Term and Soul Snare didn't make it, neither did Crescendo, since, grant I do want to eventually swing in, the speed of the deck is actually reduced because my general is more expensive. Ghostly Prison and Oblivion Ring also didn't quite make it, neither did Journey. I'd rather have just hard removal instead of a temporary answer. Pyrrhemia didn't make it because I might not have a lot of creatures out, but I also don't have a lot of red to pump and spam it. And Insurrection is a great game-winding card, but the mana curve of this deck is so very high that it just couldn't stay. Death by Dragons is more of a gimmick. Since I added a 3rd color, Ruination had to come out. Chain Reaction never really does kill anything. And Chroma's Vengeance might actually hurt us more since we have more enchantments and artifacts now. Same thing, this is just an overcost of wipe when I have better removal. And this is a tech card and a poor quality. Things like Terminate or Wrecking Ball compared to this, which one's obviously better is obvious then. Then we have the creatures left over. I like the Cacodemon, but that mana cost is kind of way up there. There was just too much expensive stuff to include. And then there's a Gravedigger with some minor recursion, but being that it's to hand and not to play, kind of made him also not make the cut. And granted, this is my favorite card ever printed. I have a collection of 7th edition Fallen Angels. I can't really abuse her in this deck as is. Like, if I was running Vish Cow and I had lots of ways of recurring, then she would make the cut, but as is, there's just not much use for her. And then the rest of these are just the cards that were in the Bassandra deck, the ones that did not make the cut. Like, the Hedge Mage is a fantastic card, but I'm not going to have a guarantee of 2 mountains and 2 plains out. There's the black-white one I can get as well. that I think just taps and sacks life and gains life. Same thing with the Guild Mage. There's a black-white Guild Mage I can include. So if I ever do keep adding to this collection for like a Vishkal Subdue or a Malfagor minor deck, then I'll probably just keep on adding here. I chose not to even bother with Malfagor, if you noticed, because while he's fun for what he wants to do, I've always felt that in his colors, black and red, to remove creatures and destroy creatures, you can do a lot easier than discarding your hand, especially if you're just going to get your general out. So while I'm not entirely fond of Malfagor, he may make it into the sideboard, so I can just do a transform to it at some point. Archangel just didn't make the cut because she's too expensive for what little she does, and I don't have a lot of white mana for the kicker here. Shattered Angel is again just not up to snuff, as is Wall of Omens. This is the other colorless land that could have been in the deck, but being that I am now 3 colors with very poor quality dual lands, it's not going to stay in there. And the rest of these are just the extra lands themselves. And that is the current Tariel deck. Again, for the groups that I play against, like I have 3 completely different metas. One is a kind of like a super player friendly, newish to the game meta. One's a middle ground meta, and I have a really highly competitive meta. It's about 2-hour drive away from me, but I do visit them quite often. This deck is somewhere between, well, this is just currently not anywhere near a strong power level. So it's usually something I'm playing with newer groups, but to be honest, since I remember how my Tariel deck used to work, and seeing how well Zergo decks are doing, this is kind of a disenchanting deck to, well, not, that's a stupid word to use. This is kind of a disappointing deck to play right now. I'm just not really feeling it, so I'm kind of probably going to keep fetching cards for the transformative deck, but I may set this aside for a while. Like, it's a nifty deck and it's fun. The self-restriction is always interesting, but I think I keep remembering what my other Tariel deck used to be like, and the creep level comparing these two to each other. Like, I don't normally mind running the same general in 2 decks. Like, I currently have 2 Akroma decks, which I'm getting ready to post shortly. But one of them does something completely wildly different, and they both excel at what they do. This is essentially a Dega good stuff deck, and there's a lot better stuff to put in a good stuff deck. But yeah, if you have any comments or anything, go ahead and post. But to be honest, there's not a lot I can really do here. Like, obviously I can switch cards down the sideboard, I can keep collecting stuff. Like, that's really it. But I do have a few other deck lists to come up. I have been on a purging bin, getting rid of a few extra trade binders. So I have 1 Super Pimp deck I've been essentially just focusing all my trade fodder for. But I also have 2 other decks that are kind of interesting that will be shown shortly as well. I don't normally like combo decks, but I had to build one for a group I'm playing against because they are all playing combo. So I wanted to have one as well. And the other one is, well, it'll be a surprise, I suppose. Well, until next time, anything else, let me know. If, again, any comments, I'm always welcome. If you think this is a stupid video, I agree. I'm sorry I wasted your time making you watch this. But yeah, if not, have a great one there.